and from area police department SWAT units. More than 100 officers to surround the complex with heavy firepower. From a former member of the cult whose parents remain inside, this plea to cult leader Vernon Howell.
Look around them and realize what they're up against. Lay down your arms and come out and put an end to this before it gets any worse.
Even as officials attempted to negotiate with cult members by telephone, ATF agents mourned the loss of 4 of their own. 14 others were wounded, some seriously. It was difficult to accept, even for seasoned law enforcement professionals.
Our hearts go out to these brave agents who died today in the line of duty, and to their families. Today's events point up to the fact that federal law enforcement officers across America place their lives on the line every minute.
Newspaper reporter Mark McFerrer was on hand to cover the raid as agents tried to serve warrants at the compound about 9:30 this morning. When the gunfire started, he also became a target.
I mean, the shots were that close. I mean, flying over our heads, and it shook us up. It shook me up. I'm still shaking.
This isn't the first time there has been trouble at the compound, which houses the Branch Davidian cult. But this time, officials seem determined to bring it to an end.
The man is definitely a danger to the people in the compound and to himself.
Several children were released around 4 o'clock. They were taken from the compound by authorities in a van. The armed camp was quiet most of the day, but a parade of law enforcement vehicles moved up and down the road leading to it. An armored personnel carrier appeared at one point, but there was no exchange of gunfire as authorities pondered what to do.
They are planning the strategy of what's going to happen today and in the days to follow if this thing does continue.
Half a dozen children were released overnight in exchange for messages broadcast on a local radio station from cult leader Vernon Howell, who also calls himself David Koresh, but no more broadcasts were heard during the day.
We're not discussing negotiations right now.
An afternoon briefing on the situation was cut short. Authorities said top officials were too busy. Earlier, authorities defended the raid that led to bloodshed.
I don't believe is that we were outmaneuvered or outplanned. The problem we had is that we were outgunned.
Neighbors of the cult say until now, the place was very peaceful.
I have never seen them. I remember, I just heard of them being down there. They don't seem to bother anybody, around.
Moon over Mount Carmel. As it rises, tanks roll around the Branch Davidian Compound, and the cult's leader David Koresh tends wounds received in Sunday's raid. As a sign of good faith, authorities have delivered medical supplies to the compound.
Apparently it's necessary, he believes, to have that injury sewn up. Also, he's indicated that there is a change in color to the injury.
Evidently, Koresh is still well enough to negotiate. Another child has been released from his compound. 21 children are out now, and they've said they want to go home.
Children appear to be smart and well-educated, very sharp children.
The cult leader has expressed regrets about the agents who died in Sunday's raid on his compound.
There's also very much a tendency to justify what did occur by saying that it was in fact an attack on his residence and that he was responding with like force.
Kind of keeping my eye on it.
Sightseers now watch the military occupation from a hill. Some predict an act of Congress before it's over.
To pay for this thing, that's not right.
Because it's so expensive.
Yeah.
Between the crowd of media and authorities, Waco estimates it's already seen a $1 million economic boost. Hotels are jammed, and the government has instructed innkeepers to keep the rooms ready for a while. Permanent phone lines have been installed for reporters. Another night, the coffee is brewing.
It's getting cold. Everybody wants hot chocolate or hot coffee.
It's been very clear that the FBI has no intention at all of letting up the heat on the compound, Passover or no Passover. They're even getting more creative with the selections they choose to blast through their loudspeakers. We've heard a foghorn, car horns honking away, and the melodious sound of a telephone off the hook. That went on for hours. And no surprise at all today to hear that Passover hasn't started yet in the compound.
So they've kind of resolved it to be beginning sundown tomorrow. and ending sundown on the 14th.
The federal agents have been emphasizing that in addition to tanks and all the other intimidation tactics they're using now, there's a whole different category of tactics they can use when the time comes. When might that be? Well, you could hear the edge of disgust over the delay of Passover.
This is just another date in a long series. I'm just nervous if they start bringing up Christmas.
The big consideration will continue to be the safety of the children inside.
If you hadn't seen it, you might not believe it. Just ask those who missed the news today.
Oh, that's shocking. They committed suicide?
I don't believe that.
Houston and the world watched as the Davidian Compound and the cult itself burned.
Because the burns are a very painful way to die.
But Dr. David Olson says many of the cult members may have died from smoke inhalation, not the fire itself.
The time that fire was set, they may have had literally just a minute or two to escape.
Instead of tear gas, the FBI says it used a non-explosive chemical, CS2, a powder that neither starts nor spreads fire.
I think the flash point is like 244, so that takes a pretty good fire just to get it to do anything. It won't burn.
3 of the surviving cult members may be suspected of starting the fire, but will they be charged? And the other survivors? And what about the killing of 4 ATF agents 51 days ago?
They could charge aiding and abetting, or they could charge a conspiracy of all of those people involved in there.
Arson or murder, too. But law professor John J. Douglas says the fire changes the cult story by adding a new element.
There's going to be tremendous sympathy in this situation as a result of all the deaths.
Clearly, there is little sympathy for David Koresh, the man who saw himself as God.
I just don't think he was religious.
No, I don't think that's religious at all. It's stupidity.
The FBI says it did not fire a shot, but today's action that prompted the fire does not impress everyone.
I hate to see the way it happened, but, you know, it's sad to see for the children go out that kind